Hey, I'm Hallie, and one of the things we keep thinking about is how today the parents of fourth graders at Robb Elementary were supposed to be celebrating. Today was supposed to be their last day of school, their graduation. And now those parents are planning funerals for their kids in a town that is shattered from grief, flattened by it, and furious because one of the only things clear tonight about the investigation into that massacre is what's not clear. After police tried to lay out a timeline, giving a few answers, yeah, but even more questions. So let's start tonight with what we know, at least what we know right now. Here's how this day went down. Tuesday, 11:28 a.m., according to police. The shooter crashes and then gets out of his truck. 2 minutes later, that's when the first 911 call comes in. 10 minutes later, the gunman goes into Robb Elementary. We've got video of that we're going to show you in a second. 4 minutes after that, so 11:44 a.m., Uvalde police enter the building. At that point, the shooter is already inside that classroom. Those adjoining classrooms where those kids were, those 19 kids who were killed, those two hero teachers. And then look at that last thing on screen. 1 hour. It took an hour before a Border Patrol tactical team ended up killing the shooter. A lot of questions on this timeline. I mentioned that video. This is it from a law enforcement source that shows the moment that the gunman entered the school. He apparently walked in unobstructed because now police are going back on what they told us originally, that there was an armed school resource officer on campus. That's apparently not the case, as we heard in this back and forth with our Tom Yamas. Watch.
Was there a school officer on campus, and was that school officer armed? Because that's what we've been told.
So at this time, no. No, there was not an officer readily available armed.
Uvalde's police chief is defending his department, saying it is important for our community to know that our officers responded within minutes. But there was no definition of what responded meant or how long within minutes actually was. And there's also this video appearing to show people begging law enforcement to let them inside the school, to let them get closer to do something. You hear that?
Because I'm having to deal with you. Get across the street.
I got to tell you here, NBC News cannot confirm the exact point, right? The time of the day when this video happened or what officers were doing. Police aren't able to confirm it either. And I promise you we're going to talk about all these questions. But before we do, I got to do something else. We got to talk about the stories of a couple more of the kids that we're learning about, who were taken from this world, from this planet way too soon. The kids who were in that classroom, like 10-year-old Tess Matta. Her sister had so many amazing things to say about her, that she loved Ariana Grande. She loved the Houston Astros and getting her hair curled. Her parents didn't know she died until late in the night when a Texas Ranger had to take them into a private room. There's 10-year-old Layla Salazar. She was super fast. She loved to run. Her dad told the AP she had just won 6 races, 6 of them at field day at school not too long ago. She loved to sing along to Guns N' Roses. Actually, Sweet Child of Mine. That was one of the songs she would sing when her dad would drive her home from school. This is McKenna Lee Elrod. She was really into gymnastics. Her aunt said she had a smile that would light up a room. She went on this list of adjectives: beautiful, funny, smart, amazing, this little girl. Nevaeh Bravo, another 10-year-old, her cousin, wrote on Twitter, "Rest in peace, my sweet girl. You didn't deserve this." Again, she was only 10. Miranda Mathis was 11, and a friend of her mom's told the Washington Post she was spunky, she was smart, and that her best friend was her brother. And now today, we're just now learning that the husband of Irma Garcia, one of the hero teachers killed in this attack, has also died from a heart attack. Reportedly coming home from a memorial and collapsing. Joe and Irma Garcia leave behind 4 children, as if this town didn't have enough pain already. We're also just learning that President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden will head to this small town in Texas, Uvalde, on Sunday. We've got Carrie Sanders and Morgan Chesky on the ground there. Pete Williams is joining us, too, to break down the investigation. But I want to start with Carrie, who is at today's presser. And, Carrie, we're not going to lose sight of the victims here, OK? And part of not losing sight of the victims is understanding what happened with these little people, when these little people were slaughtered, right? And the investigation into how this could have happened. And you talked to the officer today about one of these pieces of information that they gave. They claim that during this hour-long period between the time that police arrived and the shooter was in the classroom and then the gunman was killed, there was some sort of discussion, but it appears that it was only one-sided. They used the word negotiation, but said the shooter was not responsive. Tell us more about this.
Well, you know, when they used the word negotiation, that immediately made me think that there was a back and forth conversation. So that may explain why there was this 1 hour period. But apparently it was the officer speaking in without any sort of response. So I'm not sure negotiation is the right word, which then raises the question about the officers waiting an hour to go in and waiting for a specialized team from Border Patrol to do that rather themselves. Now, let's talk a little about the first timeline, which is the car goes into a ditch at 11:28. He gets out of, actually, it's the stolen pickup truck. He exits the passenger side. There is a phone call shortly after he gets out because he makes some gunshots at witnesses there who were going to help what they thought was a motorist who was in trouble. He then climbs the fence, and the DPS here says that he didn't actually get into the building until 11:40. That's about a 10-minute window, maybe 12 minutes if you want to take it from the moment he got out of the vehicle with his weapon and got into the school. As you just noted, the initial information about there being a school resource officer confronting him, one story that the school resource officer fired, another one he didn't. Turns out there was no school resource officer engaging the gunman. There was no school resource officer even on the campus. The gunman goes down the hallway, goes around the corner, and then gets into that classroom. The officers who responded, okay, I'll give you a little geography here, how small this town is, but also how close the school is to the police department. It's 1.2 miles away. If you were driving in your car at the speed limit and doing all the stop signs, it would take you 5 minutes to get here. Officers with sirens blaring could get here much quicker. We know the officers did get here. They did go in, but there was this period now, this close to 1 hour period where the officers were outside and he was inside and they could not enter in. Now, maybe they didn't have the equipment to do this. Maybe it's something that you see on TV where you take a gun and just shoot the door handle and the door opens. There are certain pieces of equipment that officers might have, even in a small town here, like a shotgun with a special type of load that could shoot off the hinges of the door. But more importantly, who can get in through any closed environment, like a car in a crash or a house on fire? That's the fire department. Nobody called the fire department for their equipment, as far as we can tell, to say, bring your equipment, we need to open that door, we need to get in. Now, in the chaos of the moment, maybe it didn't cross somebody's mind, but in this 1 hour period where there was initial gunfire, and then the officers say with all that rush of gunfire, they believe most of the children were killed, but then there was some more gunfire. There are parents here and just residents of the community who were wondering, were there children who died that could have been saved if those officers went in? And what really made things so difficult here is that when Victor Escalon from DPS here in Texas held his news conference and then was peppered with that question for a better explanation, he said that's all, and left open so many more questions that now a community is wondering, what do we believe? Who do we believe? Because the story keeps changing, and the story is changing coming from the authorities. It's not just sort of like the stuff people hearing on the street. This is coming from those who are wearing uniforms, Hallie.
So it's the community, Carrie, but it's also specifically, right, the parents who are already dealing with excruciating, incomprehensible heartbreak. And one of them, I think the dad of one of the little girls, of Jackie Cesaris, who died in the shooting, says parents were trying to charge in. The parents wanted to charge in and weren't able to. And you have to, I think it's so difficult not to think of the parents here as we are simultaneously looking at this timeline from police and these unanswered questions about how this could have happened.
The parents who wanted to get in there were doing what I think any parent would do, is like, I will do whatever it takes to save my child. And when they saw that the officers who are on the outside now with a perimeter, and we can hear in some audio, although we don't know the specific timetable about just go in or let me in, and people wanting to get in, there's a report of one person who was actually placed in handcuffs by some marshals because she was getting so upset and urging some sort of action. We do know that some parent, at least one parent, was able to get in through some means and pull their children out the window. So we know some people were able to do that, but the crowd grew here very quickly because even if you weren't in the car, you could run here. It's a neighborhood school. Yep. So folks were rushing here. Yeah, I mean, so the questions that are being raised right now, it's all driven, one, the nation wants to know, were the officers doing their jobs and did they do them properly, and why did they hold back, or did they hold back? And then I think the other question is one that's really driven by the grief and understandable anger by those who lost children and those who just live here. Because as we've said, and it's not an overstatement when I tell you that everybody seems to know everybody here. People go to picnics together. They know each other. It is a very connected community here. And so their anger is justifiable on top of the anguish and, you know, the grief that is just overwhelming here. Hallie?
Kerry Sanders, I'm so glad you're there for us. Thank you for being there, and I know we're going to talk again in the days to come. Pete, let me come to you here, because there's a couple of questions, right? There's these two gaps, the one between 11:28, or let's say 11:30 when that first 911 call came in, and then 11:44 when police arrived, and then 11:44 and the time that the shooter was actually effectively taken out by this tactical operation. I am curious, because you are so well connected on law enforcement sources, what you are hearing from them about how this went down and why there would have been a situation where this hour-long gap could have existed.
Well, there's so much we don't know, and they can't really assess what happened here until we get more information. You know, there's no indication here of when the police department actually got the call to come, and no indication that the school district ever put out an active shooter report. So it's not clear when the school became aware of what was happening here, when the police found out. So that's one question. The second question is, and it's one that we just have to put on the table, is when were these fatal shots actually fired inside the classroom? You know, there are some indications, simply because of the lack of any discussion about shots being fired from other timelines that we've seen, that would lead you to believe that most of the fatal shots were fired within a few minutes after Ramos entered the classroom. Setting that aside, however, it's still important for police to get in quickly. And as for why they didn't get in more quickly, I mean, there are many possible explanations or justifications, I guess, or explanations. One is that they were taking fire apparently through the walls. Remember that he has this very powerful weapon that is capable, certainly, of shooting through cinder block walls. So the police are taking fire from him inside. They can't see where he is. They can't really shoot back because they don't know where he is, and they don't know where the students are inside the classroom. But why didn't the police shoot at him through the windows? I think that's a question that many people have asked, because yesterday the head of the Department of Public Safety said that once Ramos got inside the classroom, he was not only firing shots in the classroom and at the police through the walls, but he was also shooting at people outside the school through the windows. Well, if he was shooting outside through the windows, couldn't somebody shoot back at him through the windows in the same way? So I think the law enforcement people that I've talked to all say we need to know more, but it sure seemed like this should have gone a lot faster.
You've talked about the timeline, Pete, and I just want to say this, too. One thing we heard from police today, from law enforcement, was, to speak to your point, about a flurry, what they described as a lot of gunfire sort of immediately, and then that gunfire tapered off. The conflicting information, if you will. You talked about the school resource officer, for example. There's this question of the door appeared to have been unlocked, although then the law enforcement officials today said, well, we're checking on that, et cetera.
The outside school door locked.
The outside
unlocked.
School door, correct.
But the door into the classroom appeared to have been locked.
I've spoken with law enforcement experts who point out that the word barricade means a little bit something different, I think, to police than it does to the general public. That a barricade could mean when a door is locked, or let's say there's desks piled up and officers are taking fire. Because one of the other things that we know is that officers, based on what law enforcement has said, were taking fire from the gunman who was attempting to basically hold them off during this hour-long period.
That's right. Barricade may simply be nothing more than he just locked the door into the classroom. And, of course, these were sort of hardened steel doors designed to keep active shooters out. But, of course, once somebody gets into the classroom and then locks the door, those same doors then keep the police out. And that's one of the difficulties here. But, you know, other questions. Why did it take so long? We've been told that one of the reasons they were able to get in is that somebody produced a key. Why did that take so long? And then, as Kerry said, you know, why weren't the police able to respond more quickly with breaching equipment? They did apparently try to batter the door in, but that didn't work.
Pete Williams, thank you for staying on top of this investigation for us. Appreciate it. And I know we'll talk again in the hours to come. I want to go to Morgan Chesky now in Uvalde. And Morgan, before I go to you, I want to pick up on something that Kerry said right before he said goodbye, which was this report of a parent being potentially handcuffed in these excruciating moments as they are waiting for some word about their children. We have just heard now, literally in the last 3 minutes, from the U.S. Marshals Service, with a senior official denying that any marshal on the ground put any parent in handcuffs. I want to be clear about that as we're getting this information in. Again, rolling coverage as it has been for 2 days now. You've been on the ground. You've been talking with people in the community. These unimaginably difficult scenes of parents, singing Amazing Grace today outside Robb Elementary School. People in the community trying to support these families who have lost the thing most important to them. Tell me what else you're seeing.
Hallie, you have 21 crosses behind me at Robb Elementary, and then right in the middle of the town square, you have another tribute. 21 crosses there, the names of each victim, those 19 students and 2 teachers, covering blue hearts on those crosses. And we were there for several hours earlier today. And I have to tell you, Hallie, we have 2 simultaneous things happening in this community. Confusion regarding what took place in those fatal moments. And then you have a town trying to figure out how to move on from this. When we were in the town square, we saw people coming from all over this area. People who had grown up in Uvalde, maybe moved away to neighboring San Antonio, make the drive with their children to pay their respects to those who lost their lives. I did have a chance to have a conversation, though, with a mother, Crystal, and her son, Jaden, Hallie. Jaden was inside Robb Elementary School when this took place. With his mother's permission, I asked him some questions about what happened. He told me he was in a classroom. He heard the gunshots. His teacher told everyone to find a hiding place while she went and locked the door. I asked him, did you find a good place to hide? He told me there really wasn't any. I went to the wall by where we hang our backpacks. Some people got under tables. And he told me that the gunman actually shot through the window of the door into their classroom. If you're familiar, it's typically, a very small window into the classroom with the door locked. He was not able to get inside because the door was locked. In the process, Jaden's teacher and a classmate were injured by something from the gunshots. They both are expected to be okay. And he told me that he wasn't really sure how long it was before some men in camouflage broke the windows on the outer wall of the classroom, and they were able to get kids out that way. 2 things that stick with me more than anything, Hallie, since I arrived here. I said, Jaden, will you ever feel safe walking inside a school again? He said, no. And then I asked him, because I noticed as he was walking around the crosses, he was taking time to sign something. So I said, do you know any of the names on those crosses? He goes, oh yeah, those were most of my friends. I said, what'd you write on there? And he told me, he wrote, you deserve better. Hallie?
How old was this kid?
The 4th grader.
And that a 4th grader, Morgan, has to answer those questions, right? Has to be even in a position to talk about something that he has lived through, a nightmare like that. I don't know how. It's gutting. It's gutting. It's gutting to these families, and it's gutting to this community.
Yeah. Yeah, there aren't the words. There really aren't. People here are still stunned, and there's no matter what kind of plan you have in place to kind of move on from this. I know they have grief counselors here at the Civic Center, but people who didn't even know anyone exactly inside are still kind of walking around this town in somewhat of a stunned shock, because it truly is the absolutely unthinkable. Everyone feels like they're safe until they're not. And now Uvalde, Texas is forced to cope with a tragedy that will that they'll carry with them the rest of their lives.
Morgan
Hallie?
Chesky, live for us in Uvalde. Morgan, thank you for being there. We're going to talk more, of course, about what's happening on the ground in Uvalde, but let's talk about what's happening just a few hours' drive away from that massacre. You have the NRA getting ready to meet tomorrow in Houston for its big convention. It's not just gun advocates, it's also gun reform advocates who will be there too, outside as this convention is going on inside. So you've got Houston tonight now bracing for the protests, for demonstrations. because you have these gun reform advocates ready to take this right to the NRA's doorstep. So who's going to be inside? Former President Trump, he's the headliner. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. Texas Senator Ted Cruz. He's also set to speak, but he hasn't answered NBC's questions to confirm he actually will. That said, he did have a rather confrontational moment with a reporter overnight for asking him why school shootings only happen in the U.S. Here's that moment.
Why is this American exceptionalism so awful?
You know, I'm sorry you think American exceptionalism is awful.
I think this aspect of it.
You got your political agenda.
No, it's honestly.
God love you.
But you can't answer that. You can't answer that, can you, sir? You can't answer that. Why is this country?
Why is it that people come from all over the world to America? Because it's the freest, most prosperous, safest country on earth.
It may be the freest. It may be the most popular.
Why are our kids dying in school?
Ken Delanian is joining us now. So, Ken, this is an extraordinarily newsworthy moment, right, that we expect to see this weekend in Houston. What else are you hearing about what to expect, what we might hear, et cetera?
I mean, look, this has the potential to be a real galvanizing political spectacle, Hallie. You know, as you mentioned, former President Trump expected to speak Friday. The governor of Texas, where all this just happened, and the Senator Ted Cruz also expected. Interesting that Texas Senator John Cornyn pulled out. He says it was unrelated, it was for personal reasons. You know, given what we're learning about how badly outgunned the police were in this Uvalde shooting, it will be particularly interesting to hear how these Republican leaders talk about the rights of, for example, 18-year-olds to purchase military-style assault rifles. You know, there was once a day when the NRA and the gun lobby would go silent after a mass shooting, but in today's political environment, it rewards brazenness. For the NRA and its supporters, it's not really about winning the argument among the broader public anymore, because polls show most people are in favor of some gun restrictions, including an assault weapons ban. It's about wielding power in Republican primaries and keeping Republican politicians in line, and that's what we're going to see a lot of this weekend.
What's interesting here is you've also got some Democrats who are listen, the NRA has long been a powerful lobby, but you have some Democrats who are talking about how its power is waning a bit. We know they've been hit with lawsuits, with leadership scandals, with, you know, a bankruptcy filing. I think talk about what's happening there, the influence that this group has on lawmakers now, right, today in 2022.
No, it's absolutely true that the NRA is not what it once was. It has suffered some serious blows in recent years. It had to lay off employees in 2020. In 2021, it declared bankruptcy in the wake of, as you said, that lawsuit by the New York Attorney General over corruption allegations. But the NRA's financial problems have not seemed to put a dent in the political power of the gun rights movement. Many gun owners vote this issue whether they are NRA members or not. And in fact, supporting gun rights really has become a bedrock Republican principle, even among those in the GOP who don't own guns. And so that's what's really driving this. You know, whether the NRA is strong or weak, the gun rights lobby remains strong, Hallie.
Ken Delanian, thank you. We should note that the mayor of Houston, some other officials are going to hold a news conference in the next little bit here about security at the convention. We're going to bring you the latest out of that later in the show. So you've heard Ken talk about kind of the political backdrop here. Let's talk about the political backdrop in Washington, because on Capitol Hill, you have a group of senators led by Chris Murphy. You see them here on your screen. They got together in private for some casual, informal talks, if you will, on some kind of gun safety legislation. We learned Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has said he encouraged one top Republican, Senator John Cornyn, to be talking with Democrats to try to find common ground. So there's that. They're looking at federal red flag legislation and background checks, too.
We are not going to allow this to become the new normal. We are never, ever going to give up until we make our schools, we make our shopping malls, we make the streets of this country a safe place to live and work.
It comes as the Senate today failed to pass a procedural vote on a domestic terrorism prevention bill that Democrats have tied to guns. This bill would have made federal law enforcement agencies look at threats from white supremacists and other domestic extremists. Let me bring in Scott Wong now. Okay, Scott, give us the reality check here, right? Because this meeting today, we showed that graphic on screen. And if you're not a political nerd like me, like, you know, some of those people are pretty big name senators with clout in their respective parties. I want to play what we heard from Texas Senator John Cornyn, who, again, top Republican from Texas, the state where this most recent mass shooting happened. I want to play what he said about a path forward.
There's a whole list of things that we can consider, but I think particularly mental health, access to mental health treatment is high on that list. In touch with a number of colleagues about discussions. I don't think it's helpful to make those particularly public right now.
Scott, what is the most realistic thing, given the developments over the last 24 hours, that we could see on Capitol Hill? Because if history is precedent, right, you know as well as I do, we have seen time and time again shootings happen, discussions happen on Capitol Hill, but ultimately no actual laws passed. I think one distinction we should say is Las Vegas. After that mass shooting there, the then president, Donald Trump at the time, did take executive action to ban bump stocks. That's about all over the last 8, 10, 12 years.
That's right, after Las Vegas, I will point out, as you pointed out, that was executive action, not congressional action. And so folks here and who emerged from that meeting, that bipartisan meeting, said they are cautiously optimistic. They said, look, we know that there has been inaction on Capitol Hill for the last 10 years, ever since Sandy Hook and that tragedy. Here we are once again. They say what feels different. When I talk to people like Pat Toomey, Joe Manchin, and others, they say it's the frequency that these events are happening, these mass shootings, the casualties, the number of people that are impacted, and the severity of these types of attacks. Going after black shoppers in a grocery store, going after and targeting innocent, small, young children. And so there is, some folks see a glimmer of hope. As you pointed out, these are deal makers, right? These are big-name senators, including John Cornyn, who is one of Mitch McConnell's top lieutenants, a former member of leadership. Kyrsten Sinema, who cut the infrastructure deal, worked across the aisle. Joe Manchin, obviously Pat Toomey, who have worked on gun issues for the past decade. And so these are people who do know how to get stuff done, Lindsey Graham as well. But at the same time, they know that this is an incredibly tough issue, and that, the NRA is involved and activists on both sides. It's an animating issue, and it's going to be really challenging to see them sort of get to the finish line here.
Scott Wong, live for us on Capitol Hill. Scott, I'm glad you're there watching all of this, and I know you will be for the days to come. Appreciate it. So to come here on this show, the former president lost an appeal. Now he's going to have to testify under oath in New York. We'll tell you why. Plus, new tonight, actor Kevin Spacey facing sex assault charges in the UK. We've got the details that are just announced today. Actor Kevin Spacey charged today with 4 counts of sexual assault against 3 different men over in the UK. British prosecutors say these assaults happened between 2005 and 2013. Spacey was also charged with non-consensual sexual activity with one of these men. And keep in mind, he's had sexual assault and misconduct allegations against him before, including one in 2018 when Spacey was charged with indecent assault involving a teen boy. Spacey pleaded not guilty at the time, and that charge was later dropped. As of now, NBC News has not yet heard back from Spacey, from his rep, on these latest charges. Stephen Romo is joining us now. Stephen, this is evidence gathered in an investigation by Met Police. What else do we know?
Yeah, that timeline you laid out, Hallie, is what we know right now. Those charges include the 2005 allegation from one man saying he was assaulted twice in London. That third sexual assault charge from 2008, also in London, but this one is a bit more serious. It says causing a person to engage in penetrative sexual activity without consent. And that last charge is a sexual assault charge from 2013 in Gloucestershire, another town there. And as you mentioned, we have reached out to Spacey and his team and have not yet heard back from them.
Let's talk about what's next, right? Because it's important to note these are over in the UK. Spacey, of course, is American. Would even extradition be on the table? Is that something that's in the realm of possibility here?
Yeah, we've talked to our legal experts a bit about that. Of course, the United States and the UK have a very strong extradition treaty, but right now it's not clear that any UK authorities have asked for Spacey to be extradited to actually face those charges. Of course, he could go on his own to the UK to face them. It's something we're going to have to wait and see if that's even on the table right now. Sort of no answers on that front.
We mentioned what had happened. I think people remember back in, 2018, and some of those, the allegation against him then that he pleaded not guilty to, the charge that was dropped. But he's been acting again. He's got 2 movies at Cannes Film Festival right now, right? How much, when you talk to people in the entertainment industry, could this be maybe another tipping point for the work that he's doing, if you will?
Yeah, if you look back to sort of when this all started unfolding back in 2017, when Star Trek Discovery actor Anthony Rapp tweeted out and said that some allegations against Kevin Spacey, sort of the first we heard of this, that happened when allegedly happened when Rapp was just 14 years old back in the 80s. In 2017, that was when Netflix sort of cut ties with Spacey. The House of Cards show he was in continued their last season without him, and he wasn't in many movies until then. It was only just these last two movies, as you mentioned, that he's been in, haven't been released yet, that he's sort of tried to have a bit of a comeback. And then these criminal charges, we'll have to see how exactly that plays out for his career. Of course, this would be the first time he would actually face trial. You mentioned that 2018 charge that ended up being dropped after the civil suit was dropped. So this could be the first time he actually faces trial. Again, I'll have to wait and see how the entertainment industry reacts to that type of news.
Stephen Romo, good to see you. Thanks so much. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, Lebanon's spy chief met with U.S. officials in Washington this week to talk about picking back up negotiations with Syria to try to free Austin Tice, a journalist, and other Americans being held there. It's been almost a decade since Tice, who's also a former Marine, went missing in Syria. President Biden met with the Tice family earlier this month. Number 2, former President Donald Trump has to testify in a New York civil investigation. A state appeals court today ruled he's got to answer questions under oath in an investigation into his business practices. The former president and his 2 oldest kids, Donald Jr. and Ivanka, had tried to block subpoenas for their testimony. Number 3, actor Ray Liotta. You know Ray Liotta, Goodfellas, among his many, many, many movies. He's died at age 67. His publicist says he died in his sleep while shooting a film in the Dominican Republic. The Emmy-winning actor is survived by his daughter and fiancé. Number 4, Justin Timberlake is selling his song catalog in a deal valued at more than $100 million. You might know his songs, Cry Me a River, Bye 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 when he was with NSYNC. The agreement does not cover any future music. Number 5, Ellen DeGeneres is signing off after 19 seasons and more than 3,000 episodes. Her very last episode of Ellen included appearances from her very first guest, Jennifer Aniston, and from Pink, the singer who wrote the show's theme song. For the first time now today, we are hearing from the pilot who passed out mid-flight, causing his passenger, who had no flight experience, to land the plane at a Florida airport. I know you remember this story. Here's the pilot.
I don't feel like a miracle, but I guess maybe I am. If I'd have just done my job and stayed conscious and landed in Fort Pierce, everything would have been cool.
Oh, that's Kenneth Allen. He collapsed while flying earlier this month. That forced Darren Harrison to land the plane with the help of a flight instructor on the ground. It turns out Allen had a tear in an artery in his heart. He had open heart surgery. He spent 6 days in the hospital. But then this moment, when he was reunited with flight instructor Robert Morgan, the EMS team who met him on the runway, and the other passenger on the plane, Russ Frank, Allen said he also has spoken to Darren Harrison, of course, that passenger. You remember this from Savannah Guthrie's exclusive interview, saying he apologized to Harrison for putting his life in danger. When we come back, gun violence in the U.S., experts say some of them not treated like a public health problem, in part because of a political fight that's been going on for decades. We're going to explain this after the break. The massacre, the shooting, the horrific attack in Texas that we've been talking about for the last 2 days is one of many instances of guns in school. More than 500 students and teachers have been killed or hurt in mass shootings in this country since 1999. And the U.S. is not immune to massacres. This has happened around the world, but we don't hear about them as much. Why not? Because even in places where guns are part of their culture, some governments have made sure or tried to work to make sure they're not part of the problem. Mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting across America, bringing outrage and calls for changes in gun laws. But sweeping gun reform in the U.S. has not been passed by legislators. The murder rate in the U.S. is higher than other countries. Just 2 years ago, in 2020, 79% of murders happened with guns in this country. In Canada, 37%. In Australia, gun deaths dropped to less than half that. And in the UK, only 4% of murders were because of guns. The difference, experts say, pointing to study after study, our gun laws.
Another modern horror. 34 men, women, and children massacred by gunshot.
Australia faced its worst ever mass shooting in 1996 when a man killed 35 people in Port Arthur. That prompted fast changes to gun laws in that country, including gun licensing and registration, a waiting period for purchases, banning semi and automatic weapons, and a gun buyback program that surrendered, by some estimates, about 1 million guns. Australia has seen only one mass shooting in the 26 years since. In Canada, the 1989 mass shooting of 14 women in Montreal led to the tightening of gun laws requiring shotgun and rifle licenses. But after pushback, that registry was abolished in 2012. More mass shootings followed. After the deadliest one in the country's history in 2020, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced an immediate ban on 1,500 types of military-grade guns, including the AR-15.
There is no use and no place for such weapons in Canada.
The UK also cracked down on guns after a pair of mass shootings in 1987 and another in 1996.
We're all going to stand by each other and do what we can to get each other through.
The country banning semi-automatic weapons the first time, then putting a ban on all handguns after the murders of 15 kids and a teacher at a primary school. The UK now has one of the lowest gun death rates in the world. Of course, important to note here that some of the countries we're talking about have much smaller populations than the United States. The Uvalde school shooting is putting a new spotlight on why gun violence in this country, according to some people, is not being treated like a public health epidemic. And there's an interesting piece of this that we've got to talk about, and that's what you see on your screen, the Dickey Amendment, part of a political fight that's gone on for more than 25 years. Here's the deal. In 1992, the CDC created a Center for Injury Prevention and Control. You had these studies that started to draw attention to guns. A year later, one study from this center showed an increased risk of homicide associated with the presence of a gun, a firearm in a home. Now, after that study, the NRA said, hey, CDC, they basically accused the CDC of being biased against guns. It lobbied lawmakers to shut the center down. Now, lawmakers didn't do that, but they did pass an amendment, the Dickey Amendment, as a kind of compromise, saying that none of the funds, none of the money for that center could end up promoting anything that could be seen as having to do with gun reform. So from that point, right, until 2020, the CDC was kind of frozen, pretty much, from paying for research, funding research aimed at potentially preventing gun violence. Then lawmakers approved $25 million in funding to study gun violence in hope would thread the needle without promoting gun control. Let's bring in Dr. Kavita Patel. Dr. Patel, explain, let me just start big picture here. The CDC says guns are the #1 killer of kids, right? Talk a little bit about why some experts and medical professionals believe it is important to classify gun violence as a public health epidemic.
Yeah, Hallie, it's incredibly important to also just look at the facts that we do have. Not only is it a #1 killer, but in the 15 to 24-year-old age range, we have 49 times the rate of death by homicide by guns than any comparative country, a developed country. So this is, by all proportions, when you just put it up against things such as car accidents, alcohol, all the diseases we've had to talk about, you and I, COVID, for example, this ranks up there. So that gets treated as a public health emergency. Why? Because you need to understand the causes. You need to understand what interventions there are. But as you point out with the Dickey Amendment, the funding for it federally and locally has dried up, essentially, leaving us literally to kind of go around blind without understanding the underlying causes of gun violence.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that has started to change, right? Because now, as of just the last couple of years, you can get federal funding to do research on stuff like, you know, the effect of firearms, et cetera. But it's still early days to draw any conclusions from those studies. Do I have that right?
You can. You do have it correct. The Dickey Amendment still stands, just to be clear, but they did make clarifying language that gave the CDC and other federal agencies some latitude. But Hallie, guess how much money has gone to that effort? $25 million. $25 million. And no really large investigator-initiated grants. The way that I got trained, by the way...
And you're saying that's not a lot, right? You're saying $25 million sounds like people like a lot of money. You're saying in the scope of government that's a small amount.
Not when you look at the proportion of the problem. If this were anywhere near a fraction of what it is, $25 million might be a decent start. But we just talked about COVID. We're spending over several $1 billion for research on COVID, all valid. We don't even have anything near that for gun violence.
When you talk about, and I want to shift gears to talk about another piece of this, too, that relates to medical professionals, which is mental health programs, because, you know, you look at what's happened in Texas, and you had the governor there, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who said, very clearly, obviously, this Uvalde shooter had a mental health problem. The 18-year-old killer who went in and slaughtered 19 little kids, right? He also, the governor of Texas, is getting some attention for having cut $200 million worth of state spending for mental health programs. Talk a little bit about the government responsibility and how you see that mental health funding fitting into this bigger picture as it relates to gun violence.
Yeah, nothing frustrates me more than to hear this, oh, well, we have a mental health problem. Two things could be true and not related. We do have a mental health problem. Hallie, we have a number of people with mental health disorders that were a higher risk of dying because of COVID, but I'm not blaming their mental health disorders for the effect of a novel virus. So, yes, it is true. We have people with mental health disorders. As you point out in Texas, not only did they cut funding, this is a state that has not expanded Medicaid as it was afforded and possible and fully funded in the Affordable Care Act. So not only have they undermined it, stopped the research, stopped the care, but using it truly as a red herring to gaslight a real issue. But the bottom line, we could reduce mental health issues to zero. We still have too many guns in this country.
Dr. Kavita Patel, good to see you. Thank you so much for being with us. Coming up, emotional testimony from Amber Heard today, saying she's been humiliated and gotten death threats since Johnny Depp's trial against her started. What to expect from closing arguments tomorrow. Plus, U.S. health officials say don't be surprised if we see more monkeypox cases pop up. What we know about how it's spreading when we get back. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Midwest Bureau, Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt has signed the most restrictive abortion law in the country now. It bans abortions after the fertilization stage. The law lets private citizens sue anybody who performs an abortion. The only exceptions are when the life of the pregnant woman is at risk or when the pregnancy is a result of rape or incest and has been reported to law enforcement. From our New York Bureau, a yoga teacher suspected of killing an elite cyclist in Texas is believed to have traveled to New York City. U.S. Marshals released a video this week. It shows Caitlin Armstrong, they say, boarding a plane, look at that, to LaGuardia, which is an airport outside New York. She's been on the run for more than a week, accused of killing Anna Mariah Wilson after finding out, allegedly, she'd been involved with her boyfriend. From our West Coast Bureau, a toddler was found sleeping in a closet at home with reptiles, birds, dogs, more than 50 cats. Officials in San Bernardino County say they found the 3-year-old in what looked like a makeshift zoo. The child's now been put in protective custody. The parent was booked into jail for child cruelty. To Amber Heard now, getting the final word back on the witness stand today in an emotional testimony. She told the jury that her ex, Johnny Depp, promised he would ruin her career and humiliate her after they broke up. She says the humiliation has not stopped since, especially on social media over the course of this defamation trial. Listen.
This is horrible. This is painful. And this is humiliating for any human being to go through. The threats he's made to humiliate me globally are being lived out in real time in front of you, ladies and gentlemen, for the past 6 weeks and for the whole world since our camera's here.
That's the last thing the jury heard from witnesses today. Heard's team rested its case after that. Sources close to Johnny Depp tell NBC their lawyer's cross-examination of Heard today speaks for itself. More on that in a bit. Closings start tomorrow. Then the jury will get instructions and start deliberating. Steve Patterson has been following a lot of this trial for us. He joins us now. So, Steve, you know, this testimony from Heard telling the jury about what she called global humiliation and threats she's faced during the trial. It feels like this was strategically intended by her team to try to end on a note that jurors would remember.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Look, I mean, I think it's an understatement to say that Heard hasn't been the most sympathetic figure or victim in this trial, and I think she's trying to appeal to her humanity. I mean, we all know how maligned she's been online. I mean, the almost oppressive amount of Depp fans who have really gone after her, the whole internet subculture that has popped up around maligning Heard has been unbelievable. So I think in appealing to not the legions of Depp fans or just people who are interested in the trial outside of this online, but to those seven members on that jury. I think she's appealing to the fact that they may be seeing a woman who is constantly and consistently bullied. And she said during that testimony that she's had death threats, that she's had people telling her that they wanted to microwave her baby and other such things that sound just horrible. So, yeah, it was emotional, it was direct, it was powerful, and I think as a last sentiment for a jury that's going to be deliberating this very soon, I think it was effective. Hallie?
One of Depp's lawyers, Camille Vasquez, during cross-examination, told Heard that, quote, all her lies have been exposed to the world multiple times, her words. Talk about some of what Depp's team tried to zero in on today.
Well, obviously, the allegations of abuse, that has been really the cornerstone of their entire argument, but really focusing today on how some of the publicity went out, specifically when it comes to TMZ. The Depp side has alleged, essentially from minute one, that a few things were leaked to TMZ from Amber Heard. One of them is a video that we've actually played on the show. It's a clip of Johnny Depp just raging, slamming cabinets, throwing things down, swearing about Amber Heard. The Depp team alleges that during the course of the divorce, that she released and leaked that video to TMZ to try to make herself look better. They also alleged that she released her whereabouts when she was going to originally file the TRO, which would have been back a few years ago, and that she had cameras come out and appear there with a bruise on her face. The one time that Depp's team says that she didn't cover up her face wound with makeup, and she was just there rounding the corner. Here's what we heard in court today. Listen to this.
You actually had alerted TMZ that you would be filing a TRO against Mr. Depp that very day, didn't you?
No, I did not.
The one day you didn't bother to wear makeup to cover up the mark on your face.
I did not call TMZ or any other news source or paparazzi source. No one.
Heard's team alleges that she never released that video. She wouldn't even know how to edit or leak that video, and she never leaked her whereabouts about where she was filing that TRO. That has been something that the Depp side has been pressing her on for days now. Hallie?
Steve, thank you so much. I know we'll be talking more when closing arguments happen tomorrow. Appreciate it. If you want to learn more about everything that's gone down during this trial, we got you covered here on NBC News Now. The curious case of Depp v. Heard tonight, 10 o'clock Eastern, right here on however you're watching our channel right now. To the growing concerns now about monkeypox, because today you've got the White House saying an outbreak of this scale and scope around the world hasn't been seen before. And officials are warning we shouldn't be surprised to see more infections in the days to come. You've already seen confirmed cases in a bunch of countries, Australia, the UK, Israel. The CDC director says as of yesterday, there have been 9 cases in 7 states here in this country. You see them here. Most of the infections, the reported infections, are with gay and bisexual men. And the administration is asking everyone to stand in solidarity now with the LGBTQ community to prevent stigma, to prevent discrimination. Let's bring in Meg Terrell. We've got a note here, Meg. Transmission of monkeypox can happen whether you are gay or not, right? And I think the destigmatization point is important here. Talk about what else we heard from the CDC director.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a lot of questions about, are there new ways that this is spreading? And really, the emphasis is no, it's based on what we know so far. It spreads via close contact. Close contact really in any form or fashion is the way this spreads, and then it can spread from any person potentially who's at risk from being exposed to another case. There is a concern now that because a lot of these cases can't be traced to travel to an area where this disease is endemic, that there is now community spread happening. So they're doing contact tracing right now to really figure out how this is spreading, but they're watching it closely.
The U.S. has vaccines and treatments for monkeypox, right?
Yeah, because we have vaccines and treatments for smallpox in the same family as monkeypox. And so there are 2 approved vaccines that the U.S. has in stockpile. One of them is a newer vaccine called Jynneos, and that is the more preferred one because it doesn't have some of the side effects of the older vaccine called ACAM 2000. I spoke with Bavarian Nordic, which is the maker of that newer vaccine, and they said the U.S. has supported the development and manufacturing of that vaccine. And so we're actually in a better position than many countries around the world in terms of having more than 1 million doses available to us. And so we are starting to hear about that getting requested and deployed in very specific circumstances where it might be appropriate. And there also is a smallpox treatment called TPOXX, which we have in the stockpile as well, which should help with monkeypox.
Meg Terrell, always good to have you on talking about everything we need to know when it comes to our medical lives. Appreciate it. Coming up, what parents were telling me today about having to talk to their kids at school drop-off and about what to do if a shooter comes to their school. We're going to have that conversation in just a minute. So right now in this country, you've got so many parents thinking about, so many people thinking about those parents in Uvalde, right? The families in Uvalde that are now dealing with the loss of 19 little kids, 19 little bodies gone, and 2 hero teachers who did everything they could to try to save those little kids. So many people across this country are thinking about that. And if you're anything like the people in my group chats, right? Talking with your friends, talking with your family members, you're feeling it in your heart, and you're feeling it in your family, and you're thinking about it with your kids, and you're thinking about it at school drop-off and school pickup, right? You're thinking about, how do you have those conversations? How are you supposed to talk to your kids about something this horrific, a nightmare, right, that is now a reality? So many parents across the country are dealing with these tough conversations, thinking about these tough moments. I headed down to Virginia this morning, right after school drop-off, to talk with some parents who are trying to protect their kids' innocence as much as they can. But in this world, in this day, in this moment, that feels so hard to do. How was it for you dropping off your kid this week after what we saw in Texas?
Wednesday morning was hard, you know, doing the normal chaos of getting 3 kids ready, packing lunches, doing breakfast. I made it sending my 3rd grader over. We got him to school, and then bringing my other 2 to preschool. And after dropping them off is when I lost it.
It's just that feeling in your gut of nervousness that you hope your kid is not feeling. And we talked about that lockdown this morning in the car on the way. I can tell she may be aware that something bad happened, but not necessarily the details. And I'm not ready to discuss those details with her.
You just get clouded with these ideas of, like, you never know what's going to happen.
I volunteered to put myself at risk to join the Navy out of college, but our kids didn't volunteer to be put in these situations.
I grew up in Alabama for part of my life, and we did tornado drills. Very different than the kind of drills our kids have to do now.
We just kept saying something bad happened. It was far away, but don't worry about it, you know. But then after dinner, my husband takes him to get his hair cut, and it was on the news in the barbershop. So then we had to have the conversation that the lockdown drill that you did, you know, that's what happened today to other kids.
It's hard to have that conversation because I don't want it to instill fear in them, but at the same time, I want them to be vigilant.
As a parent myself, I struggle with saying to my kid, don't worry, because sometimes it just feels so random.
Yeah. And I kept saying, you're safe at school. Don't worry, you're safe at school. And I kept telling him that, and in my heart, in my mind, I know he may not be, but I'm not. I want him to believe it and let that worry be on me.
They will be adults someday, so we can't hide the world from them forever.
Do you want to hide it from them just a little longer?
I would love to. My kids had just started walking to school, my 2, and the last couple days I've been driving them, and it's just, I have this overwhelming dread that comes with, taking them to a place where I'm not there.
And we have a great school, and I trust them, but I also know that, like, they can't stop everything, and those locked doors may not be enough.
That does it for us this hour. We're going to have more for you here tomorrow, same time, same place. Thank you for being with us tonight and every night. Appreciate it. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.